Hi everyone! Isn't it crazy with all the snow that we got? Well, that calls for a very special story today by request from a very special little girl. Hi Emery, how are you today? Hi sweetheart. So Emery and I have one of our most favorite Christmas stories in common, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And I can quote this from beginning to end, but I'll spare you so you can have the pictures. Every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot. But the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. He hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now, please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. Maybe because his shoes were too tight. Or it could be perhaps that his head wasn't screwed on just right. But I think the most likely reason of all was the bit of his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve hating the Whos, staring down from his cave with a sour, grinchy frown to the warm lighted windows below in the town, for he knew every Who down in Whoville was busy now making a holly Who wreath. And they're hanging the stockings, he snarled with a sneer. Tomorrow is Christmas, it's practically here. Then he growled with his Grinch fingers nervously drumming. I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming. For tomorrow he knew. All the Who girls and boys would wake bright and early and they'd rush for their toys. And then, oh, the noise, 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 noise. That's one thing he hated. The noise, 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 noise. And then the Whos, young and old, would sit down to a feast. And they'd feast and they'd feast and they'd feast, 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 feast. They would feast on Who pudding and rare Who roast beast. Oh, roast beast was a feast he couldn't stand in the least. And then they'd do something he hated most of all. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, would stand close together with Christmas bells ringing. They'd stand hand in hand, and the Whos would start singing. They'd sing and they'd sing and they'd sing, 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 sing. And the more the Grinch thought about this whole Christmas thing, the more the Grinch thought, I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 53 years I've put up with it now, and I must stop Christmas from coming. But how? Then he got an idea, an awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea. I know just what to do, the Grinch laughed in his throat, and he made a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat. And he chuckled and clucked. What a great Grinchy trick. With this coat and this hat, I look just like Saint Nick. All I need is a reindeer. The Grinch looked around, but since reindeer were scarce, there were none to be found. Did that stop the Grinch? Ha! The Grinch simply said, if I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. So he called his dog Max, and he took some red thread, and he tied a big horn on the top of his head. Then he loaded some bags and some old empty sacks on a ramshackled sleigh, and he whispered for Max. Then the Grinch said, "Giddy up!" And the sleigh started down toward the homes where the Whos lay a snooze in their town. All their windows were dark. Quiet snow filled the air. All the Whos were dreaming sweet dreams without care when he came to the first little house on the square. This is stop number 1, the old Grinchy Claus hissed as he climbed to the roof, empty bags in his fist. But then he slid down the chimney, a rather tight pinch, but if Santa could do it, then so could the Grinch. He got stuck only once for a moment or two. He stuck his head out of the fireplace flue where the little whose stockings all hung in a row. These stockings, grinned the Grinch, are the first things to go. Then he slithered and slunk with a smile most unpleasant around the whole room, and he took every present. Pop guns and bicycles, roller skates and drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorns and plums. He stuffed them in bags. Then the Grinch very nimbly stuffed all the bags, one by one, up the chimney. Then he slunk to the icebox. He took the Who's Feast. He took the Who Pudding. He took the roast beast. He cleaned out that icebox as quick as a flash. Why, the Grinch even took their last can of Who hash. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee, and now, grinned the Grinch, I will stuff up the tree. And the Grinch grabbed the tree and started to shove when he heard a small sound like a coo of a dove. He turned around fast and he saw a small Who. Little Cindy Lou who was no more than 2. The Grinch had been caught by this tiny Who daughter who'd got out of bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at the Grinch and said, "Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why?" But you know, that old Grinch was so smart and so slick, he thought up a lie and he thought it up quick. "Why, my sweet little tot," the fake Santa Claus lied, "there's a light on this tree that won't light on one side, so I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, then I'll bring it back here." And his fib fooled the child. Then he patted her head and he got her a drink and he sent her to bed. And when Cindy Lou Who was in bed with her cup, he snuck to the chimney and stuffed the tree up. Then the last thing he took was the log for their fire. Then he went up the chimney himself, the old liar. On the walls he left nothing but hooks and some wire. And one speck of food that was left in the house was a crumb, even too small for a mouse. And then he did the same thing to the others whose houses, leaving crumbs much too small for the other whose mouses. It was 1/4 dawn, all the Who's still abed, all the Who's still a snooze, when he packed up his sled. Packed it up with presents, the ribbons, the wrappings, the tags and the tinsel, the trimmings, the trappings. 3,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet, he rode to the top, to the tip-top to dump it. Pooh-pooh to the Who's, his Grinchiously humming. "We're finding out now that there's no Christmas coming. They're just waking up. I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open just a minute or two. Then the Who's down in Whoville will all cry, boo-hoo." "That's a noise," grinned the Grinch, "that I simply must hear." He paused. The Grinch put a hand to his ear. He did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low, then it started to grow. But that sound wasn't sad. Why, this sound sounded merry. It couldn't be so. It was merry. Very. He stared down at Whoville, the Grinch popped his eyes. Then he shook. What he saw was a shocking surprise. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came. Somehow or another, it came just the same. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. And he puzzled 3 hours till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville, they say, that Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light. He brought back the toys and the food for the feast. And he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast. Thank you all for letting me share with you one of me and Emery's favorite stories, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Now go outside, don't freeze, and enjoy this little bit of snow that we got. Merry Christmas.